A challenge, I'm telling you up front. So if you need a toilet in the meantime, you can go, I don't mind. Or if you would like to go home earlier, I don't mind. So you don't have to worry. Okay, today's topic is what's at stake. It is based on Daniel 7, obviously. And my point today is what's at stake in the holy war? What's at stake in the great controversy? So what is the most important thing in great controversy? The main thing is that God has a plan. When you open Genesis 1 and 2, you can see that God created everything, including humans, with a plan. And that plan included a purpose for human beings and sense of their lives. So God has a plan from the beginning. Also, the book of Daniel says that God has a plan for humanity. And that in the fulfillment of that plan is inevitable. So one of the characteristics of the prophecies in Daniel is that their fulfillment is inevitable. It means that they are going to fulfill regardless of human reaction. These apocalyptic prophecies are different than classical prophecies. Classical prophecies are prophecies of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Jonah. And in the book of Jonah, there is only one prophecy, and it's very short. He would go through the streets of Nineveh, and he would preach, Nineveh will perish. That was his message. However, the inhabitants of Nineveh reacted to that message, and they repented because of their sins. And God changed his plan, he changed his mind, and he did not destroy Nineveh at that time. However, the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation, and especially Daniel, their fulfillment is inevitable. The kingdom of God will come regardless of your and mine reaction. Jesus will come for the second time regardless what our reactions to that are. So it doesn't matter whether we are ready or not. Jesus is coming for the second time. So the fulfillment of all prophecies in Daniel, when I say all, I mean Daniel 7 to 12 and Daniel 2, their fulfillment is inevitable. So our reaction to that is not very much. However, in that plan that is inevitable, human beings, they have the right to choose within this plan. They have a right to choose a side in this controversy, in this plan. And this is very important. So God's general plan for human history will be fulfilled. But within this plan, me and you, we have a right to choose sides. So the first point I would like to make is that we have a right to choose a side. Let me go further and give you some historical background of Daniel 7. There are two dates possible. One says that the vision was given in 553 BC, and some other says that the vision was given in 550. Regardless of these 3 years of difference, the vision was given in mid-6th century BC. So this is well before our time. Probably we are talking about 25, 26 centuries. Secondly, now these are the other years. Secondly, Daniel was in his 60s. He wasn't a young man as he was before. Also, at that time, Belshazzar was the regent of the Babylonian kingdom. What does it mean, the regent? Actually, he ruled in the name of his father, Nabonidus. Nabonidus, he left Babylon, and he left the city of Babylon, and he left the city of Babylon and the throne in the hands of his son, Belshazzar. Belshazzar in Daniel 5 is called the king, but at the same time, Belshazzar is aware who is the first ruler of that kingdom. Because when he promised to the person who is going to read all these inscriptions on the wall, he promised that that person, among the other things, will be the third person in the kingdom. Why? Because Belshazzar himself was the second. So this is happening during the time of Belshazzar, which means that still Babylonian kingdom is alive. So Daniel 2 happens probably 50 something years before that. The prophecy was given, but nothing yet happened. Only the first part of the statue was fulfilled. Okay. Now, this is what I told you in the morning, that you need to know Daniel 1 to 6 in order to understand Daniel 7 to 12. Of crucial importance is to understand Daniel 7. If we do not understand Daniel 2, if we do not understand Daniel 2, we can't understand anything further in the book of Daniel. So, there are similarities between Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. For example, in Daniel 2 you've got 4 metals, but in Daniel 7 you've got 4 animals, 4 beasts. These animals or beasts in Daniel 7 are all unclean. And they are not only unclean, they are also hybrids. And you know that God forbids people in Israel to produce hybrids, and also he issued prohibition for eating and using unclean animals for sacrifices and human diet. So the animals in Daniel 2 are unclean and they are hybrids, which means in the start, the prophecy is telling you that all these beasts are not friendly. Okay, we have these 4 metals. After the 4 metals of the statue in Daniel 2, we have a so-called transitional period, which is described through a mix of iron and clay. On the other hand, we have 4 animals or 4 beasts, which are 4 kingdoms. Then we have this transitional period described through 10 horns and the little horn himself. At the end of this prophecy and dream, we have the kingdom of God in Daniel 2, and we have the kingdom of the holy ones of God in Daniel 7. Until now, do we agree that these 2 chapters are parallel? They have similarities. The structure is similar, the similarities are there, and we can connect that. This is very important, because no one will tell you which are or who are these 4 beasts in Daniel 7. We know that there are kingdoms, but which ones? You have to go back to Daniel 2 and find that we are talking about Babylon, about Medo-Persia, Alexander the Great's kingdom, Rome, and then transitional period. So basically we need understanding of Daniel 2 in order to understand Daniel 7. That's why the book of Daniel should be read from the beginning towards end. It's the same with the Bible. One of the problems of Seventh Adventist Church is that we as a church, we emerged from eschatological movement called Millerite movement. And the focus of this movement was on Daniel and Revelation. However, the Bible does not start with Daniel and Revelation. It starts with Genesis 1 and 2. So basically, in order to understand all of this, we have to go always backwards. in the Bible in order to understand the content of Daniel. Why? Because Daniel, he wrote with the vocabulary, meanings, and language of his heritage. His heritage in religious sense is the Old Testament. So that's why we have to go back there in order to understand certain things. Okay. Now we have these similarities. Horns, kingdoms, and everything. And these similarities run from Daniel 2:41 to 43, and Daniel 7:20 to 7:22, and 24 to 27. This is the space given to the transitional period. Statistically, this period gets the most of the space in Daniel 7 and Daniel 2. Which means that this is something very important for the writer of the book and should be of great importance for us reading this book. Now, what are the differences between Daniel 2 and 7? Kingdoms in Daniel 2 are described as positive or not overtly aggressive. So, you've got this description of Babylon through the kingdom, through the ruling of Nebuchadnezzar II. Nebuchadnezzar II is his name and title from the historical books outside of the Bible. And Nebuchadnezzar is addressed as King of Kings. He is addressed in superlatives. And obviously Daniel had a very positive attitude towards Nebuchadnezzar. If you compare his attitude towards Belshazzar, you're going to find that it was completely different. But towards Nebuchadnezzar is very positive. So the kingdoms there are described not in a very aggressive or negative way. Secondly, the kingdoms in Daniel 7 are described as very aggressive, particularly the fourth beast. So the kingdoms are very aggressive. They're hybrids, they're unclean animals, and they're overtly aggressive. What else? The description of the historical events given in Daniel 2 are mostly political. Why I say mostly political? Because in the Bible, everything is religion. Even in ancient Near East, where Israel came into existence, for all his neighbors or her neighbors of Israel, religion was everything. And even politics was guided by religion. So this is mostly political, but Daniel 7 is described as overtly religious. So the description in Daniel 7 are more religious than the description of the kingdoms in Daniel 2. Basically, we are given information how these kingdoms behaved, and especially how the little horn behaves as well. Okay, let me give you quickly the interpretation of the vision. In Daniel 2, the first metal is gold, and in Daniel 7, the first beast is one like a lion. So it's not lion, but like a lion. Why? Because it has characteristics of a lion and characteristics of a bird. And that's why it's a hybrid. From Daniel 2, we know that we are talking about Babylon. Lions with wings is not just a description of Babylon. If you go to Assyria, which was the empire just before Babylon, you'll find out that also they used lions with wings. If you go to Paris Museum in Louvre, if you go to British Museum in London, you'll find that even Assyrians, they portrayed their kings with human heads, the body of lion, and wings. The Assyrians, somebody would portray their kings with their head, the body of bulls or oxen, and wings as well, in order to metaphorically demonstrate their strength and their quickness. So very aggressive. And this is the portrait of Babylon as well. If you go to Berlin, in Berlin Museum, there is a reconstruction of the gate of Ishtar. Ishtar was one of the goddesses in Babylon, and the Germans, they took every single brick from Baghdad, 14 miles from Baghdad, which is the old Babylon, and they put it into Berlin Museum. And also they reconstruct the street of Ishtar. And all over the place, on that street, just on the walls in the museum, you're going to find lions with wings, which is quite Babylonian. The second one is silver in chapter 2, but in chapter 7 is like a bear. So it's not bear, but it's like a bear. And this bear is very aggressive because it is told, eat meat, eat flesh. Bear can be a carnivorous, but also herbivorous animal. Bear, they eat fruit, but they eat fish as well, and very rarely they attack other animals, including and human beings. So, like a bear, also aggressive. According to Daniel 2, the second kingdom, according to Daniel 2, Daniel 5:28, Daniel 8:20, the second kingdom is Medo-Persia. This is very important, because some theologians would tell you that silver is not Medo-Persia, but it's Media. And this is the conclusion of majority of theologians outside Adventist Church. The third metal was bronze, and the third beast is someone like a leopard. It has 4 heads and also wings. Totally hybrid animal. That's Alexander the Great and his descendants. How we know that? From chapter 8 of Daniel, we know that the goat is a symbol for Alexander the Great and his descendants, and he won over the ram, Medo-Persia. What is next? The fourth metal is iron, and the fourth beast is something that is uncomparable. There is everything before that is like, but the fourth beast is something like nothing, like anything before. It's not something like anything before. You can't compare that. And if you compare that with the iron from Daniel 2, we can conclude that we are talking about pagan Rome. Pagan Rome. Okay, until now, let me give you some dates. Babylonian Empire in history is known as Neo-Babylonian Empire, and it shouldn't be confused with Old Babylonian Empire. Abraham, he actually came from which city? Of Chaldeans. Is even souther than Babylon. Actually, Abraham, by his ethnic origins, he was Babylonian. He was Chaldean. Then with his father and the rest of the family, they went to Haran. Haran is on the north in Mesopotamia. And from there, according to Genesis 12, he was called to leave his father and go to the land of Canaan. So Abraham, he lived in 18th century BC. And that was the time of Hammurabi. Hammurabi was probably the best known ruler of the old Babylonian Empire. He is known for Hammurabian law. Do you know what is in the Hammurabian law? I don't know everything, but I know that in Hammurabian law, there is a law, I'm paraphrasing. If a wife cannot bear children to her husband, she is, that's her duty, to find a female slave who will sleep with her husband, and the child born by these female servants will be the official descendant and inheritance of the master, of the female master, of the wife and her husband as masters. Is that clear? So Sarah and Abraham, being Babylonians, both of them, they knew for that law and they applied that law. And they made a mistake because it was human law, but not God's law. Anyway, this Babylon mentioned in Daniel 7 actually starts at the end of 7th century BC. So almost 11 centuries after the old Babylonian Empire. That's why we have to make a difference. They start probably 612 BC, and they lasted until 538 BC. So something more than 70 years. After that, Medo-Persia starting as a major political power, but they lose twice to Alexander the Great and his army in 331 BC. And Darius III, who was the ruler, last Medo-Persian ruler, he lost to Alexander the Great, and he actually lost his wife and everything he had. Alexander the Great, he was quite a young chap when he conquered almost all the known world. He came back to Babylon, and he wanted to establish Babylon, the city of Babylon, as the center of his kingdom. He was only 33 years old. And one night, after a wild session of drinking, he died. Some historians would say that he was poisoned by his generals because they were fed up of going to war with him. Although Alexander the Great never ever lost a battle on a battlefield. Did you know that? Never ever. However, he was a drunk. So, like Samson could defeat an army, but he could not control his urges. He could defeat many Philistines, but when a beautiful Philistine lady called Delilah would come to him and say, "Please tell me, what is your strength?" The narrator in Judges would say, and she was bothering him, and he thought that he would die. That's a joke. And he told her. Alexander the Great was quite similar to that. And he died when he was 33 years old. After his death, the kingdom firstly split to 5 parts. But quite quickly, the 5th part disappeared among the 4 other generals. So effectively, his kingdom was divided between 4 of his generals. The most known parts of his kingdom were Egypt, ruled by Ptolemaic dynasty, because the Ptolemy was one of the generals of Alexander the Great. And the second was Seleuc. And he took Syria and parts of Assyria as part of his kingdom. And they're known as Seleucids. They're very important for some interpretations of Daniel 11 as well. Now we're coming after that to Rome. Rome firstly conquered the province of Macedonia in 168 BC. And in 63 BC, Pompey, one of the greatest politicians of Rome of that time, he conquered the land of Israel, Canaan, and the land of Israel became a province of Rome. So basically in that part of history, Rome succeeded Alexander the Great and his descendants. Now, this is a great question, and there is a conference this summer organized by General Conference, and I'm going to present a paper actually when Rome disappeared. Because of the Western civilization, and the Adventist Church is in its roots, it's American phenomenon. Usually we say that Rome disappeared 476 AD. And you're right, and I'm right, but I'm partially right, because that is concerning only the western part of Rome. But the eastern part of Rome, they persevered until 1453 AD. And the eastern part was called Byzantium. So they lasted until the mid-15th century AD. And that makes some interesting implication about the little horn. Because little horn, he comes up from this fourth beast. And he plucked out, or the 3 horns were plucked out. Now, who are the 10 horns? Traditionally, 10 horns are the 10 European tribes ruling Europe. But if you go back to Daniel 2, and if we follow that principle that everything starts with local, going to universal, these 10 horns should be understood as something more than just the 10 tribes coming outside of Western Rome. Because we can see that Rome was much more than Western Rome. And it was a huge, vast territory. Plus, we can say that 10 horns should be understood in its totality, because number 10 in the Bible is totality. And that 10 is not very friendly, because God caused 10 punishments over the Pharaoh and Egypt in Exodus. And we have 10 kings which are not friendly 10 kings. So, the little horn, he comes not only from Western Rome, but also from Eastern Rome. And until 11th century AD, you've got one church, where the Pope is just a Roman bishop. And there are other bishops as well. In 11th century, 1054 AD, a great schism between Eastern and Western Church happened. The Eastern Church excommunicated the Western Church, and the Western Church excommunicated the Eastern Church. One of the reasons, main reasons, was the influence. Who is in charge? Because the Pope, the Roman bishop, the Bishop of Rome, he started growing into his power. And the eastern parts of the Rome, Christian Rome, they didn't like that. And there was some kind of tension. Even today, you've got Roman Catholic Church on one side and you've got Eastern Orthodox on the other. Theologically, this is my point now. Theologically, there is no big difference between the two of them. And when we talk about the Pope, we should not insult the person who is the Pope. But we are talking about the theological system. That's very important. So we are not criticizing Francisco I or the retired one, Benedictus XVI. We are not talking about them as people, as human beings. We are talking about the theological concept of papacy. Do we make a difference here? Because this is what is important. In some countries, if we only preach against the Pope as a human being, as a particular human being, they can accuse us of religious hatred, religious intolerance. So I'm not insulting certain people in the Roman Catholic Church. I'm trying to critically evaluate their theological system, because that's the problem. Theological system. Okay? Now, we are coming to the little horn. And he is obviously in the focus of everything that is given here. And the little horn is described regularly as he who shall speak words against the Most High. Actually, he speaks blasphemy. Blasphemy. And what is part of the blasphemy? The part of the blasphemy is that these Christian systems, they claim that the church who is the only one who is the Jesus' representative on the earth, and only through the church you can gain salvation. Is that correct? If a person is excommunicated from Roman Catholic Church or Eastern Orthodox Church, they're also excommunicated from the salvation, from the kingdom of God. In the Middle Ages, the church, Western Church, they have the so-called wealth of the church. What is the wealth of the church? In Roman Catholic Church, the doctrine of salvation is by faith and by deeds at the same time. Am I correct? Unfortunately, some Adventists, they believe the same. They regard them as very conservative, they regard them as very biblically orientated, and they believe that human beings are saved by faith and deeds. According to the Bible, we are saved by God through faith, full stop. The deeds are only a product of a proper faith in God. So basically, this means that in Roman Catholic Church, as well in the Eastern Orthodox Church, besides your faith in God, after a person confesses their sins, the priest would say, I release you from your sins, which is a nonsense. A human being cannot release anybody from their sins. Only God can do that. And also the priest says, but after that you have to do something else. How do you call that? There is a special word for that. Penance. And sometimes this penance is very easy. You go home and say twice, our Father in heaven, the prayer, or you say Hail Mary several times and you're off. But sometimes it can be you have to kneel down on seeds of corn for a minute or two, or you can kneel down on some small stones, or you should wipe yourself and whip yourself and do some things. So this is the penance. According to the Bible, there is no need for penance. Why? Because Jesus paid everything on the cross. And if I try to give any penance, that would be an offense to God. It's the same in the Eastern Orthodox Church. It is also said that the little horn will be persecuting the people of God, the holy ones of God. The Roman Catholic Church, they did that in the past. And the Eastern Orthodox Church, they also persecuted those who dared to think differently than the priesthood of the Eastern Orthodox Church. But with one difference. Today we have the descendants of the Protestants in Europe. Do we have them? Huguenots, Waldensians. We have different sorts of Protestants, Lutherans, Calvinists, and so on and so forth. In Eastern Orthodox Church, somewhere in 10th, 11th century, there was a group of Christians, they called themselves Bogomils. This doesn't mean anything probably to you, but I come from that part of the world where they started their movement. Bogomils means people who are dear to God. And they started a movement which was completely different than the Eastern Orthodox Church. And actually in Middle Ages Bosnia, they became a state church. The church accepted by the king of Bosnia as the main religion. At that time, the Pope tried to organize a crusade against the Church of Bosnia, and also the Eastern Orthodox Church in Serbia, Macedonia, and Bulgaria. They tried to persecute these Bogomils, with one difference. When Eastern Orthodox Church persecutes, no one survives. Because these Bogomils, they just disappeared. And the Eastern Orthodox Church, what they did, even their graveyards, they plowed them. So you have no record of that. And everything we know about the Bogomils, we know from the books of their enemies. Because there is no document left. And probably majority of the Bogomils, they went to Western Europe, when Western Europe are known as Catars, from Catarizo, to clean up. So basically, the Eastern Orthodox Church is much more efficient in the history, persecutor of people who dare to think differently to them. My point is that the Little Horn is definitely papacy, but we need to understand that in a broader sense, not just a person who is called by this and that name, but we need to understand that as a theological concept. That's why the papacy and those concepts are dangerous, because they teach that you need a human being or human organization in order to get salvation. They are the intermediary between God and humans. They are in charge of your and my salvation. That's the problem with them. Okay, let me go further. The last one is the stone in chapter 2, which is the kingdom of God without any end. And in chapter 7 is the kingdom of the holy ones of God, which is the second advent in history. Second coming of Jesus Christ. 10 horns appear on the head of the fourth beast, and the little horn appears as the three are going out or plucked out of the horn. This is very important. The horn, the little horn, does not come out from one of the horns, but he comes from the fourth beast in the place of three horns. Okay. The appearance and activities of the little horn. Description. In verses 6 and later, he speaks arrogant words against God. Later it says that he speaks words against the Most High and attempts to change times and law. And also it says that he attempts to change sacred seasons or seasons and law. If you compare that with Daniel 2, and if you go to Daniel 2:21, there is a description who is the only one who changes times and seasons. God changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. Basically, the little horn intends to change not just law, but he tries to present himself as God. But not God with small g, but God with capital G. So the little horn has an ambition to be like God. And this is the main theological issue with the little horn. When a human being tries to be like God. When we, human beings, depends on other human being for our salvation and our relationship with God. According to the Bible, that's not acceptable. But certain systems like the papal system and the system of the Eastern Orthodox Church, they apply that. Eastern Orthodox Church, they have a different type of organization than the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church are papal system, which means the Pope is on the top, then the Holy Magisterium, the teachers of the church, then the cardinals, and then you have the others. So it's hierarchy. In Eastern Orthodox Church, they are divided into national churches. The Russian Orthodox Church, Bulgarian, Greek, Serbian, Macedonian, Romanian, Ukrainian, and so on and so forth. But what is important is that the local bishop is the highest authority among them. They have patriarchs that are above them, but even if the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, even he would like to come into the part where one guy is a bishop or episcopos, he needs to ask that bishop for a permission to serve in his area. Why? Because according to the Eastern Orthodox Church, every bishop is the icon of Jesus Christ. For us Seventh-day Adventists, that means rubbish. But for Eastern Orthodox members, being an icon of Christ, it's almost being equal to Christ. Almost. Because what the bishop says, that's the last one. Because he is the icon of Christ. And if you go against the bishop, you go against whom? Against Christ. And this is very important. In Serbia, where my wife comes from, in one city, there is an Eastern Orthodox priest who is very good. He teaches people, he converts people from atheism into theism, and they become good Christians. And the churches where he serves, they love him. However, the bishop has a friend whose son just graduated from theology and that seminary, and he asked them, could my son work in that city, in those churches? And the episcopos, the bishop, said yes, he can come and work. And he changed the good priest. And the church members, they wrote a petition and they asked the bishop, change your mind. And instead of listening to them, he said to them, you have to repent. I think there is only one noun that can describe this kind of behavior. Arrogance. That's it. Because he is the icon of Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, let me go further. The little horn makes war against the holy ones. The holy ones of God are given into his power for 3.5 years, and he persecutes them. That happened as well, historically. Many people ask me, are you not a bit naive if you think that the persecution can happen again? I have two arguments for that. First argument, human beings and everything is possible in negative way. Even today, in a democratic way, in a democratic societies, you can be persecuted because of God. I remember 2004, I was working for a security company in Bracknell, and before I got that job, I went on an interview. I told them I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I do not work on Friday night. I do not do Saturdays during the day. And they told me, no problem, we accept that, and you can work for us. After 7 months, a supervisor came to me and said, you have to come tomorrow night, Friday night, to work, because one of our workers is ill. And I told him, okay, I can't come, because you know that I'm a religious person, not working on these hours. And he told me, I don't care. England, 2004. You will say, democratic society. Where is the freedom of religion? He told me, if you don't come tomorrow, don't come at all. After that. And he was an ex-military guy. Later they told me that he was a chef in the military, actually. And even he served during the Falklands Wars. And I didn't come that night to work, of course. And on Monday, because I was temporarily employed, I didn't have my site for work, but every Monday I would call him, and ask him, could you please give me some job? And on Monday, I called the company trying to talk to him, could you please give me some shifts? And the secretary, PA of the company, replied, and she said, this gentleman, he doesn't work for us anymore. But I'm going to connect you with the other supervisor, and he can give you some shifts. And he gave me some shifts. After that, I've been told that he was dismissed, he was fired by the company because he created some other problems. He created that the company lost several $1,000s on some projects, and he was just fired without any warning on the spot. And I worked for that company for 6.5 years after that. I never worked on Sabbath, no problems. So human beings, everything's possible. Let me give you another example. I come from former Yugoslavia. So my country was part of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was a very nice country. We were a communist country by ideology, but we were relatively very free. And I spoke to Injabulo. 2 years ago when I came to England, I had huge issues how to get UK working permits because they're very tough. But when we were from Yugoslavia together, we didn't need visa to come to the UK. If you fancy, you go to UK. So the economical situation was much better, and people were very free. So you couldn't tell a joke about the president. That was something, and that was punishable. But we were very free. However, when I was a kid, I would watch telly with my parents and see how people suffered in Near East, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, and I told my parents, I'm very lucky and happy that I live in Yugoslavia because everything is peaceful, we are protected. I would go outside of my home to play with the kids on the street alone when I was 4 onwards. No one would touch you, no one would threaten you. My daughter is 7-year-old and she never ever goes out of the home, even in the backyard, on her own. Okay? So it's a different world. And I told myself, I'm so lucky that I live in Yugoslavia. But 1991, the wars started. And my father was a military officer. He died several years before 1991, but I grew up with a military uniform in my house. And suddenly I saw that uniform on the telly with blood on it. Something that I would never ever expect that to happen in my country. And it happens in a very bad way. So number one, humans and anything negative is possible. Number two, it is written. And that's enough. So when human beings feel that they're in danger, they persecute other people. Do you know that? Persecution, any form of aggressive behavior, is actually a result of fear. And very often government would tell you, we need to tighten our measures because of fear for our safety. So our civil liberties sometimes are very much limited because they tell us we need to protect you. That's why we need to read your emails. That's why we need to go into your private life. That's why we need to listen to your phone, what you're talking about with whoever. So we are living in 21st century and we can still be persecuted. Why? Because humans, if they are afraid, they're going to be aggressive towards you. That's normal behavior. Okay. What's next? What are the theological implications of the little horn's behavior? As I said, he speaks arrogant words against the Most High, blasphemy. So the little horn promotes concepts and behavior that is against God. This is very important. Concepts and behavior. There is no behavior that there is no concept behind that. So you have to have a mindset, and because of that mindset, I behave in a certain way. So if the concept is that I'm blasphemous against God, if the concept is that I'm God, then my behavior will be how? Blasphemous. After that, attempting to change times and law, which means that according to Daniel 2:21, he would like to be like God with capital G. And that's not something new. If you go to Isaiah 14, verses 13 and 14, you're going to find somebody who wanted to be like God. That's the same spirit. Later, if you go to Genesis 3, 5 and 6, this is very important. In Genesis 3:5, the serpent is telling the woman, if you eat from this fruit, you are going to be like God. And in 6, she says, and the narrator is telling us what are her thoughts. She's looking at the fruit, it's good for fruit, it's good for looking at it. And the third one is very important. It's very attractable. It attracts her heart because the fruit can make somebody wise. Keep that wise in your heads, because I'm going to tell you something about that. So basically, the first sin is about a human being, a created being who would like to become God. Every sin I commit, every sin you commit, is a desire to be like God. Everything else is just appearance. If I lie, if I steal, if I offend other people, if I gossip, whatever is the sin, whatever, basically I'm saying in my mind, I'm the measure what is good and what is right. I'm God who decides what is acceptable and what is not acceptable behavior. That's the problem of the little horn. And that's why I told you this morning, we can sit on these chairs, on these benches, as much as we like. But if in our hearts we try to be like God, we do not belong to this church. We belong somewhere else. Let's go further. The little horn, according to Daniel 7, attempts to act as God. And the little horn attempts to usurp God's position as the supreme authority. The little horn tries to be savior. The little horn tries to dictate everything. The little horn tries to be like God. The little horn gives you their or his commandments. This is what you have to believe, and this is what you should not believe. So the little horn decides what is good and what is bad. Two main questions. Who is the true God, and which God do we worship? These are the questions at stake. Do we worship the wrong one or the true one? Do we worship the wannabe God or the true God? Do we worship human beings and human institutions, or we worship God himself? That's the main question. Let me tell you about wisdom. Can you please open with me Daniel 12:10? Who will understand the book of Daniel? Many shall be purified, cleansed, and refined, but the wicked shall continue to act wickedly. None of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. This is quite strange, because in our human opinion, at least in Western civilization, Being wise means being intellectual, having knowledge, having education, reading plenty of books, having a good brain to make connections between different concepts. However, according to Daniel 12:10, wise are opposite of who? Unwise? No. Stupid? No. Wicked. And wicked is a moral category, which means evil, wicked. So being wise, it's not just about knowledge. It's not just about education. Knowledge, education, very good. And we as a church, we are an example of that. Because we as a church, we run the largest Protestant educational system in the world. Everybody knows that. And that's a fact. As a congregation on a general level, we are the most educated per capita of our church members after the Jews and Roman Catholics. Because we believe in education. And that's very good. But being wise, according to this text, is not only about education, about knowledge, about being intelligent. In the first place, it's about being obedient or not. How do I know that? Let me go back to Genesis 3:6. Eve says or thinks that the fruit is good to make somebody wise. And in Hebrew, there is a specific verb used there, and the verb is sakal, which means to know, to be wise, to be enlightened. And it is used in a very specific stem called hifel, which means causative, to make somebody wise. However, when you go to Daniel 12:10, it is absolutely the same verb, but in hifel participle, which we translate as wise ones, masculine. Can you make the difference? Can you spot the similarity? Basically, Eve, she decided to become wise by being disobedient to God's commandments. And the people of God in the last days, they are wise because they are obedient to God until death. That's the difference. And they are wise because they know who is the true God. How they know that? How we can know who is the true God? The answer on the second question is the answer. Which God do you worship? That will tell you who is the true God for you. How know which God do you worship? Because in the way how you worship Him. The way how we worship God betrays us and our heart to whom God we bow down. Do we worship God according to His word, according to His commandments, according to His revelation, or we worship God as somebody else told us how to worship God? Because the little horn, historically, it's not a pagan institution. It's a Christian institution. But only nominally. Because in its essence, it's telling you, you have to listen to human authority in order to be accepted by God. And the Bible says, you have to listen to God's word as His revelation in order to be accepted by Him. So, the little horn persecutes the holy ones of the Most High, and the little horn does not offer any choice. However, the Holy One is giving you a choice. And what is the Holy War? The Holy War is a matter of worshiping the true God. The Holy War is a matter of heart and mind. What's at stake in the Holy War? My heart and your heart. Your mind and my mind. That's the center of the great controversy. I do agree that the great controversy has an outward appearance. No doubt about that. But in the first place, the battle is there. And what is most important thing, God offers a choice. And that choice is in front of us. Are we going to follow human beings? Are we going to follow the way of blasphemy, aggressive behavior? Are we going to follow the way, I'm right, you're wrong, but you have to listen to me? If you do not, I'm going to show you who is the boss here. And that's the spirit of the little horn. It is possible, my brothers and sisters, that formally we can be part of the movement that we call the people of God, formally. Because everybody is welcome here. However, only God knows what is in our hearts, and we know what is in our hearts. That's why we have to pay attention what is there. And because we have been offered a choice, we have to choose. And that choice should be made on a daily basis. Because Jesus says, you have to be ready. Be ready for my coming. He's not saying you should be ready. He's not saying tomorrow you should be ready. He says be ready in present tense, which means now. If some of you have already accepted God's offer, you are blessed. But if there are some of us who haven't yet, please make a decision today and keep to that decision all the way until the kingdom of God becomes visible reality. Amen.